Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wind Band and Beyond podcast. The focus of this week's show is on assessment and approaches and technologies to assessment in wind band settings. In this presentation, I'm going to share some assessment strategies that I've used in a variety of elementary through high school band settings, and hope that you might find some of these useful to your own practice. So first, some reasons why we assess in wind band or anything in music or education. One is to improve student learning. Another is to improve our own teaching. So making sure that we have data that we can use to inform our instruction for the next week's activities. Also improving programs, so looking comprehensively across the school music program to identify areas of strength and weakness and opportunities for growth. So the first section we're going to focus on is improving student learning. So first we're going to look at formative assessments. Formative assessments are checks for student understanding and proficiency. These are often not graded and they occur regularly throughout the year. At the individual student level, an example of a formative assessment might be regular SmartMusic assessments, and these should all be tied to goals and objectives for rhythm, sight reading, scales, etudes, looking at the core art standards for performance, and aligning our SmartMusic assessments to meet those. Ideally, these would be collected every 5 or 10 weeks, and they are an objective measure of student growth. So SmartMusic indicates whether a student has played the note correctly and at the right time, and uses measurement tools to evaluate the accuracy of pitch and rhythm. SmartMusic does not measure intonation very well. If a student is particularly out of tune, SmartMusic will record that as a wrong note. But there is a tool called AP Tuner, which is an app for iOS, and that records intonation in real time and provides a score, a measure of, on average, how well the student played in tune. And here's an example of using AP Tuner to perform Chester on the alto saxophone. Another formative test that I would use in my band classroom was a long tone challenge, and this was particularly for beginning students who were working to develop their tone and a characteristic sound quality and play in tune over longer periods of time. We would use a stopwatch and a tuner and see how long a student could sustain a sound in tune with proper breath control, and see how we might aim for longer and longer long tones in subsequent weeks. So the one thing to keep in mind for this, however, is that different instruments will be able to play either shorter or longer durations of time. A flute player, for example, will really struggle to play more than 4 or 5 seconds in the first few weeks of instruction, whereas instruments that have more resistance built into the tone production can play much longer durations. Many of the beginning band students really enjoyed this challenge and would practice long tones with a stopwatch and tuner throughout the week, obviously having a very positive effect on their tone quality. Another formative test might be a note reading speed quiz. So having a handout that has notes on a staff with a line, and the student has a particular amount of time to get as many notes correct or incorrect, or perhaps student has unlimited time and then we just measure how quickly they can identify all of the notes on their instrument. So here's an example of how I measured growth in a 4th grade band in Johnson City, New York. This is data about one of the students in our band, Lewis, who played the trumpet. I measured Lewis's ability to play a long tone, to sight read an excerpt in SmartMusic, and to identify notes on a staff, and to count and clap a rhythm in SmartMusic as well. So these are the 4 different assessments that measured different aspects of Lewis's development as a trumpet player and musician. Here I've calculated Lewis's rhythmic score improvement by subtracting his pretest from his post-test and dividing it by the pretest. And that comes out to a growth of 5.63% for his rhythmic measure. And these are scores that I didn't share with the student, but I would share with families, and it would help me for lesson planning to know what skills I needed to work on with Lewis in the next semester. Also, Microsoft Excel does a great job at calculating these instantly. So if you set up a formula in Excel and copy and paste that, it will analyze 100 people in your program in a matter of seconds. Here's an example of how I used SmartMusic to measure student growth at the ensemble level, and this was for a high school. So for the Johnson City High School Band, I set goals for each of our quarters in terms of how fast and with what fluency we would be able to perform a variety of scales and arpeggios, what level of sight reading examples on SmartMusic we would pass as an ensemble, and how well we would perform etudes that were part of band warm-ups or just band fundamentals. We would chart our progress on these goals on a bulletin board, and we had a student in our high school band who was our data analyst, and she was taking AP Calculus, so this was a great application of some things that she learned in advanced mathematics to calculate our growth and chart our growth throughout the semester. So you can engage students in this work too, and not necessarily feel responsible for calculating all of this data. So back to the fourth grade band, here are some different objectives that I had for my fourth grade wind band players. A melodic objective was students will be able to perform a 4-measure melody on their instrument in 4/4 time using quarter notes, quarter rests, concert F, E flat, and D at 66 beats per minute. So just from a lesson planning perspective, think about how specific that is and how measurable that is. So as you're writing your lesson plans, these are the kinds of things that will really help you determine whether or not, if you're able to measure your objective, for example. This is something that very easily could be measured. So, for example, for this melodic objective, at the beginning of the term, our fourth graders on average scored a 45 out of 100. And there were 61 fourth graders that were involved in that test. And then at the end of the term, the average score was a 75. So that is a 68% growth in reaching our melodic objective. So the same thing for our rhythmic objective, which was clapping a SmartMusic excerpt. Our technical objective, which was performing long tones. So you could see that on average, our fourth grade band students improved by a percentage of 41%, going from 7.6 seconds on average to 10.7 seconds, producing a characteristic tone quality in tune on their instrument. And then our theory objective was identifying notes on a staff. So at the beginning of the term, our students scored an average of 58 points out of 100 on our note reading assessment, and at the end of the term, a 74. So being able to show administrators how students in your program are growing is really essential. Now, if you want to get really nerdy about it, you can start doing some more advanced analyses of these results. So I was really interested in looking at correlations. So if students are really good at one thing, are they really good at another? And actually found, quite interestingly, that there was no correlation between students' ability to perform an excerpt on their instrument and pass a SmartMusic test and their ability to identify notes on a staff. So many students were able to learn to play excerpts just through either rote or by memorization. And it was interesting that being able to quickly identify notes on a staff didn't particularly translate to better scores on SmartMusic melodic assessments. The chart on the left shows the growth from the pre-test, midterm, and post-test among fourth grade band students for our melodic, rhythmic, and theory objectives. So with the metric of a percentage score on the test. So this is very clear to administrators and parents and students and myself that the fourth grade band students were making significant progress throughout the term. Another reason you want to assess students is to inform your own practice. So we need to collect data that will drive our instruction. So at the ensemble level, I would use the NISMA performance rubric frequently throughout the semester to gather information about how our ensemble was meeting these different criteria that were evaluated by adjudicators. The NISMA performance rubric is tied to core art standards. I would collect them every 10 weeks in preparation for our NISMA majors evaluation in the spring. And the adjudicators were students as well as experts. So we would do self-evaluations in class where our high school band students would evaluate their own performance, but then I would also send recordings out to people who I knew were NISMA adjudicators, and they would evaluate our ensemble and send us feedback before we got to the festival. So in class or for homework, students would watch a video of our performance, and then they would use a Google form to answer all of the questions on the NISMA rubric. I would then use the data from the Google Forms rubric to illustrate all of the different components of our performance and to identify areas for growth. So this week 1 data collection from our first performance of Mars from the Planet Suite indicates that overall we have a lot of things to work on with tone and accuracy and execution, intonation, and rhythm, but particularly balance and interpretation seem to be among the weakest parts of our performance. I would also ask students to predict what medal they thought we would receive at the festival, and then provide any written comments that were acted as qualitative data for our analysis. We would also review recordings of our performances together in an auditorium, and students would use their phones to live text reactions to the performance that they could see scrolling on a screen. So in this next video, you're going to see our high school band sitting in an auditorium, watching the video, and then using Poll Everywhere to write their comments in real time. And then they can also see their comments streaming on the screen while they watch the performance. After this activity, I would collect all of the written comments that the students provided through their texts throughout the performance and put them into a Wordle. So the words that appear with the greatest frequency are the words that the students used most often. So similar to our NISMA evaluation form, we see things like blend and dynamics are things that we really have to work on before we take this piece to the next level. Also trumpets. Socrative is a great tool for assessing students' understanding, especially of theoretical concepts or things that might be expressed in written notation. So here's an example of how we would use Socrative in a class to assess students' understanding of what is on the page. So in the comment box below this video podcast, please indicate what is important for your students to know and be able to do in instrumental music. So you can reflect on the readings we've done, your personal experiences, what you've learned at IC or in your junior student teaching, and comment below for what you think is really important for students to know, as well as your reactions to this podcast. All right, thanks so much.